Hi there, I am John. Welcome to another episode of Start With You, the podcast that's all about you, the guests that I'm bringing on. And I am super pleased, thrilled even, to have the incredible Kahlief Adams on the show today. How you doing, buddy?
Thank you so much for having me, fam. I am very excited to be here. I am overjoyed to be with you. You know how much I love and appreciate you. So getting a chance to be on with you is very exciting. So what's up, chat? How you doing? I hope everybody's doing well today.
Yeah, we got a lot of love in the chat happening for you right now. If you are here and you want to just, if you're here with celebrations, obviously post those hearts in chat. For those who are listeners at home, we do these shows live on twitch.tv/KawaiiGuy. Always be sure to check out the channel, see if we got an episode coming up so you can catch us live while these are happening. But I figure I just want to dive in with you because we've been working together now for the past several years. We've known each other in this space. We've exchanged thoughts, theories, all of the above. But the one thing I have never had a chance to dive in with you on is, we were referencing Doctor Strange a bit ago. What is your origin story? How did you get your powers is really what I want to start with. Tell me a little bit about the younger you, because I know we're both in the same camp right now. So let's talk about where it all started. How did you get into producing and all of this love for media? Like, where does this come from for you?
Oh man, young Ka first of all had hair, so that was the thing. Young Kahlief had hair that wasn't just on his face; he had hair on his head, which was great. And it was nice because I could do stuff with it. It was so cool, man. Oh goodness.
I really, at some point we're gonna have to get some photos of this. It's one of those like picture if it didn't happen type of deals. I feel like I'm going into your camp now that I'm shaving my head down.
I'm happy. Come over to the bald side. Come over and rock with me
I'm getting there.
I mean, look, the story kind of starts a long time ago. I will be 44 this month. And I think back really early to, a lot of the, how do you get into a space? How do you kind of start that conversation? I was the most introverted kid on the planet. I'm still fairly introverted now. People are like, I don't believe you. How are you introverted? I was like, I'm just not socially awkward. There's a difference between, being introverted and not being socially awkward. It was weird because I was also like the class clown. In school, I was the kid who was the Kahlief would really be an overachiever if he just applied himself person. I was that kid. I was the one who was always in class and was like, this is kind of doo-doo. I don't like any of this. This is silly. Why are we having these conversations? No one knows anything about computational math. I don't need that. That's bad.
And then your taxes catch up with you in your later years and you're like, son of a bitch, I should have.
I was like, oh, if I remembered how to do fractions, I'd know how much the government is taking from me. This would have been dope. And then you'd be like, oh, that's how that actually works.
And you're like, oh, this is not fun at all. So it's actually funny that, because you were saying how you're introverted, a lot of, I've found people with introversion, especially in their younger years, or at least just that desire to just not be out there, a lot of us end up in performance in some way. So the fact that you're saying, like, I was a class clown, it's just like, okay, so to combat your introversion, you actually put up this performance.
A little bit. I mean, it's always one of those things of, I was when I say I'm an only child, it's very weird because there's like lots of story that goes along with my being an only child, that later on I found out that I wasn't actually an only child. So there's a Maury Povich story in that somewhere. But the kind of main thrust of a lot of that was, my parents both were drug addicted. So my mom and dad both were in the kind of midst of the late 70s, early 80s crack era back home in New York. I'm from New York originally. I'm out in Portland, Oregon now. And my grandma raised me. So my grandma was also very busy. So she was like going to work, and I would stay home with my aunt and my uncle, who were surrogate babysitters for most of that time. And you learn as a kid who needs to, entertain themselves, you figure out, oh, these voices that I hear in my head are not my imaginary friends. These are the people who I am making up in my head.
Yeah.
To kind of keep me sane in that way. And you wind up kind of, executing or kind of performing some of that in this outward way, which is also, not weird, but it's a manifestation of all of those other layers that kind of come along with it, right? So
yeah.
it wound up being really weird for a long period of time, where I was always the kid who had a lot of folks around me, but didn't need that energy to feel fulfilled. Because I could slot myself into a conversation or a vibe or a feel and not necessarily always feel like I was connected to that thing. So it was an interesting balance of how do you try to kind of, manage that in your early years when you're still trying to find yourself and figure out like who you are as a kid. And then when you become an adult, and then especially when you become an adult after the age of 30, you remember of how much of that stuff you actually really don't need anyway.
Yep.
Right. You're like, oh, all of that extra layer of I need to be in the room. Oh, I need to be doing this. I need to be in that spot. All of that stuff flitters away really quickly once you become an adult and you have that grounding of self, which is really cool.
It's so funny that you actually mentioned that, because I was talking with some colleagues over the weekend about the need for like the networking components of the business and all these factors. Like, you got to be in the spaces, you got to go out, you got to do the mixers. Everything that I have learned over the years has taught me you don't actually need that. That's actually a distraction to the actual work that's happening behind the scenes.
Yeah.
And so it was almost training, as you said, as a kid, working within this isolation of, okay, well, I have this space for myself, and I can craft whatever I want to craft within this space that I have. And that's how you were able to push it forward. It wasn't relying on somebody else to give you permission to do so.
No, it was actually really interesting because it's a thing that when I have conversations with my significant other, my wife, she's like, the thing that I notice about you is that a couple things don't really affect you. Guilt is one, which is interesting. And two, you really understand who you are at this point in your life. And I was like, I don't know if I feel that way about myself, because I feel like I'm still navigating and trying to figure out who I am and all the things that make me me. And you wind up planting kind of arbitrary flags that you don't need to at often points. But then you also wind up doubling down on some of the stuff that's there that feels mostly authentic to you. Right?
Yeah.
Like, so you're like, oh, the troop out to go do all the stuff at every convention, in year 1 through 4 or 5, when I didn't have connections, when I didn't have an ability to kind of get what I needed, that was the thing. That was all meet and greet, face to face. I need that stuff, but it wasn't for energy. That was for a purpose. It was for a drive towards a thing.
Yeah.
And that's a very different thing to kind of think about, is like, what brings you good energy, what makes you feel good, and what's the thing that needs to get done, right?
Yeah.
Sometimes those things are two totally diametrically opposed things, but they all are on the same coin, right?
So how do you get the tell of like if a person's a good feel, for example? So like when you're first going into those spaces, especially operating as an introvert, maybe like not purposely putting yourself in these scenarios, you're now putting yourself in this scenario for the purpose of either professional networking or just trying to figure out, okay, what's the next step for me? How do you get the feel or describe that? Of like when you know this is going to be a good relationship versus a bad relationship when you insert yourself in that conversation? That's
a really good question. The weird thing is it's feel though. Like I like my and I don't know if this is New Yorkness. I don't know if this is East Coastness. I don't know if this is like a part of the fabric of my being, of where I was raised. But my BS meter is really easy to detect that thing, right? I'm just like, oh, you're vibing for the sake of vibing. You're not here for me. You're here for it, right?
Yeah.
And it's changed a lot over the years, where I've filtered out a lot of those folks, and those folks are no longer in my space or in my life or those kinds of things. But like, it's good and bad, because I will instantly know people I vibe with at this point. Like, if I sense that good rapport between us and that vibe is good, and I can see that we're both in that space, like, I'm really bad about, and I don't know, again, if this is like introversion or if this is Virgo-ness. I don't know if this is any of those layers, but it's that, like, I don't really care for small talk. I want you tell me, like, give me the goods, like, give me this, like, if you ask me a question about anything, it can be risque, it can be, I will give you like a full answer, and I'm be like, yo, this is what I'm feeling, this is the way it is.
All right, perfect. So we're gonna start talking about your kinks here in a second. No.
Hey. No. Man.
But I feel you on that, in that a lot of people like to fill the void of conversation with soft or the small talk, or like, oh,
Yeah.
the general is like, oh, how's the weather? When a person asks how are you, they're not actually asking how you are. They don't really care. But finding those individuals that you can connect with on like the actual level of like, okay, you're human, we understand the same. Okay, we both don't know anything we're doing, we're figuring it out. We can all admit we're bullshitting. Like that's the vibe that we're looking for.
Yes, it is so amazing when you drop all of those weird culturally reliant walls.
Yeah.
And we're just like, hey John, how you doing? And it's not like, hey, you doing because I want to know like, what did you eat today? No, I'm like, no, how are you feeling? Like, how are you? What's your vibe today? How are you? How are you processing this moment, this life, this stuff? Like, I want to dig deep with folks.
Yeah.
In a way that is just like, let's have that conversation. Because again, it's like I have been lucky enough to have gotten out of bad situations in this life through luck and chance and people caring for me and people looking out for me. And I just don't want to waste time. Like, it's just the thing of just like, we are on a planet spinning through space. That whole picture in space that popped up.
Oh God, ago, from the new telescope?
Fam. That ruined me.
Well, how insignificant we are. It's the Carl Sagan pale blue dot statement that he made a while back.
Yeah, and it just again, like, I think there are moments where all of those things line up and it puts it into focus, right? Where you're just like, oh, so all of this stuff that we continue to do, all these cycles, all these things that we continue to perform, goes back to that level of performance, right? The things that we perform, 90%, 95% of any of that stuff doesn't matter. And it winds up coming to the forefront, especially when you're a creator, because all of this is ethereal. All of this is going away. All of this, as much as I grind and I bust my ass to put out a good show, to make a good thing, to do all this stuff, to get Twitter followers and to get TikTok people and do all this stuff, 50 years from now, when I'm in the ground, no one will give a shit. And I'm okay with that. And that's all right. So it makes me grind hard now, but it also puts everything back into focus to say, we are on a planet in the middle of eternal blackness and darkness and time and space. And all of this is going to go away. And what does that mean for the way you want to live this life today? And that changed all of that over the past couple of years. It could have been the weed or the shrooms, but it was
now we combine it, get it all combined into a beautiful mixture, and you'll definitely go deeper into that deep space. But no, what you're saying, it rings so true in a lot of conversations I've definitely had over the past few days about impermanence and how, if we can accept that there's impermanence in everything, the house that is, the ceiling that's above our head, it will eventually fall one day. Yep. Ourselves, we will not be here one day. The content of which we made, the followers we have accrued, will not be there one day. Yep. I think somebody put out a thing on Reddit, 200 years from now, when historians are looking at YouTube content and all the comments are from people, everybody's deceased.
Yeah.
Is a fact. And so you were saying how, like, acknowledging effectively this impermanence gives you the drive for now to do what you can, and highlighting, like, you've heard me speak multiple times, like, I don't give a fuck about how many followers you have or whatever. It's what matters who's here. It's like the listeners, people who are here. Yeah. That's who matters. How do you balance the grind aspect of like, okay, I'm going to keep producing, I'm going to keep doing what I can here, but also it really doesn't fucking matter? Like, how do you balance that as a creator?
It's hard because you are told often about what your worth is, right?
Yeah.
You are told often by multiple layers of not only the funnels and systems that you're working in, but the people who you have around you, the systems that you're working towards to get bigger so that you can potentially have more, either notoriety or fame or money or any of that stuff, right? And it winds up being this thing where you can drive yourself mad if you really dig into it in a way that's like, well, what does this mean about my self-worth? What does this mean about who I am as a human being? And I think it goes back to that conversation of how comfortable are you knowing that all of this is going to go away? How comfortable with you understanding that you at this moment can only do but so much, and what part of the tree are you? Like what concentric circle are you inside the tree when you cut it in half, right?
Yeah.
What ring are you, and which rings can you affect, right? It's probably, depending upon your level of access and your level of visibility, it's probably only the ring that's probably the closest to you, maybe the one outside of it, right?
Right.
And knowing that that's a part of that, it changes a lot of your perspective, because you're just like, oh, I can only do what I can do, right? I can try to do the best that I can, and if it's not good enough for me, that's the thing that I have to try to figure out. Of course, I want feedback. I want people to tell me how things are and if they like it, and help me get better at the craft that I'm doing. But all of that changes once you're just like, well, okay, I may not be the biggest person on the planet. I am lucky enough and have hopefully done enough work to get into a space where, you know, in my sphere of influence, people kind of like what I do and feel that it's good, and hopefully does some good in the world, which I get good feedback about that often. But it's really just that layer of just like, well, I can only really affect but so much until you get to a space where Oprah brings you to the avocado field, right? You're like, oh,
exactly. Exactly.
You
When you're mentioning that, it's really thinking about and reflecting more on the direct community around you, and that's who you can actually impact. So I was having a conversation with Mark Franklin Williams, who was he was a cast member of SMBC Theater with me. He's now a writer on a bunch of programming, and we were talking about how people don't even know who their neighbors are now, or if you step onto an elevator, you know, you immediately pull out your phone because you don't want to make, you know, small talk with the person who's standing next to you. Oh, heaven forbid you make eye contact with them. We are so fucking closed off from every person around us that we retreat into these online communities that we form for ourselves. But even that isn't a true community. They're present for you, but it's not the same level as if the world burns tomorrow.
Yeah.
Who is there to literally help you in this moment? It may be, there may be some, like, you know, Venn diagram, some people cross over, but it's not entirely there. So, you know, as you're thinking about that, and as you're creating the space around you, like, how do you identify, like, are there particular characteristics that you look for the people that you're like, you know what, you're in this journey along with me for the long haul to the end? Are there characteristics that you can identify versus okay, I know you're here for this moment now, and therefore I'm not going to become attached? Because empathy plays a major factor in what we do, potentially. And there's a balance as being a forward-facing individual that you have to be kind of like that guard up for, like, who you let in, who's coming a part of this journey with you the long haul. How do you, I guess, are there characteristics you think of?
Well, the blessing and the curse is I'm not big enough for people to glom onto me for my clout, because I don't have enough. So that's one. Two, people who can't give me shit.
Yeah.
I don't trust them.
Oh,
you
man.
have to be able to give me shit. Like, you have to be able to call me out on stuff. You have to be able to tell me, Kai, you have a boogie in your nose.
Yeah.
Go fix that. Kai, you got some crust in your eye. Go figure. Oh, Kai, you thought you were dope. Like,
you're like your shoes, get some new shoes, like stuff like that. Like, they're calling you out.
A little bit. Like, I have been lucky enough to have met enough people in this journey of this stuff, because I've lived, I'm not gonna say multiple lives, but I've, like, it took a long time to get to here, right? Like, I've had so many ridiculous, wild, odd jobs in my life that have taught me numerous things over the course of that to be able to do this part of what I do. It has informed a lot of that stuff. But it's like, yeah, you have to be able to hold me accountable to stuff, right? And one of the things that I think is really interesting in that conversation of, like, who are the people who are just there for the sake of being there stuff, it makes me think a lot about social media, and it makes me think a lot about how we do have that interaction with each other, with your friends, with your foes, all those people who are in that space. I don't really believe in foes, because I don't believe in that. But the thing I keep coming back to when it comes to all of those layers is that on the good side and the bad side, most people will make up a narrative about you and not know you. Good and bad, right? The people who are the biggest haters have this idea of who you are, but they don't know you for the most part.
Yeah.
The people who are your closest supporters, even in the online spaces, most of those people, they believe in what you have put out in the world and that persona that you put out in the world. The lucky thing for me is that there is a razor's thin difference between who I am on the show and on Twitter and all those places, and when you meet me in real life. The person you see on the show is who I am every day that you see me. I may tell more, inappropriate jokes at home. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah,
I
yeah.
may laugh at a thing that some people will find risque or whatever.
Yeah.
And I don't put that on the timeline. But I think the most part, like everything that you see when you get a SpawnonMe show, or you see me do an appearance or host a thing, that's me. Like, so the blessing is you don't really have to worry that hard about like, do you rock with him or not?
Yeah. Yeah.
Right? You can make up your mind for yourself pretty early to be like, that dude has good energy, I like him, or not.
So,
right?
When I think about like bad energy in the space, it often comes from people placing expectations onto us, or they're expecting something of us, and we're not delivering to what they believe we should be. Now, you had mentioned if we do like the tree analogy of like we're looking at what can we actually impact and what's within our control. There seems to be a larger discourse that happens online, which you have to think beyond your community and you have to be saving the world in a much larger way. And if you're not, you're a hellion and you deserve to die in a raging fire and all these factors. And it's not a realist perspective, but it's almost an expectation of online space. I guess, you're laughing, I'm assuming you've also dealt with this type of thing as a creator and especially producing actively.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, the kind of main thrust of our show has been to spotlight people of color and underrepresented folks in the gaming space, right? And I think once you've started down a road that is more towards kind of lifting people up and I think social justice is definitely a foundational part of our show. People will then attach their own particular issues and things that they really care about to things that they say you should also care about at the same level of intensity that they do. And that's just not fair. It's not fair to anybody involved. Like I was talking about this on social the other day about like how much have we run into this wall of empathy, right? How much have we hit this kind of like empathy deficiency level, right? Where and it's a blessing and a curse, right? That's a whole political layer of that whole conversation of like, how was it to be a progressive in 2022?
Oh yeah,
and we all are in intersectionality and how that all works in a real way, right? Because I think we say we like it as progressives, but we don't practice it well.
Yeah,
right? Yeah, right. But it goes back to that conversation of like, how do you build into that, and how do you alleviate yourself of those expectations while still trying to do good in the world, right? And again, it goes back to like, what can you affect? How can you use your voice in a good way? How can you pull in co-travelers to come alongside you and say, if I can't hold this whole burden with me, how do I spread that burden out? But again, that goes back to like, how do you message that out to people in a way that you can say out loud and mean it? And a thing that I've told people often has been, I want people to hold me accountable online, but I want you to do it with care, right? And people are like, what do you mean by that? I was like, if you care about me and I've done something wrong, I've done something to offend, I've said something wrong, I've misgendered, like sometimes it happens, it's a mistake. You do that sometimes if you're, everyone is finding themselves in real time, right? So like sometimes you're just not there for that moment, right?
Yeah.
And I was like, my DMs are open for a reason. I should have closed my DMs years ago, but I leave them open specifically so that if you have beef, if you have a problem, if you have stuff, hit me. I will not fight you online. I'm not going to have that conversation on the timeline. It does nothing for no one.
Right.
It does nothing but pull in people to start doing the looky-loo thing and being like, ooh, that person over there has got some beef with that person. Let's jump in this and have a conversation. Oh, let's screenshot all this stuff. If you care about me, you will jump in my DMs and tell me I fucked up.
It's an obsession. Okay, it's an obsession with gossip, and I think we highlighted this on a previous episode. But there's a book, Brief History of Humankind, which talks about how humans are the only, basically, species on Earth that have gossip, and we thrive on gossip. And that's what let us know. It's like, oh, you don't want to go over there to that side of the hill because there's a saber-toothed tiger over there. Have you seen it? No, but you're trusting the gossip that there is, so that way you don't get eaten. And so there's a lot of those factors. So we're obsessed with gossip. But I guess one thing as you were talking about there was when we see the posts that go out, like when people are reacting to it, what is the difference as a creator between performance and actual action?
Ooh.
When it comes to like us, what we share in the world.
Ooh. The line is now blurry in a real way, like we've never really seen it before.
Yeah.
And I think that's the part to me that's actually a little scary. Is if the internet loves to be loud and wrong, and people believe that just saying the thing out loud does a thing. I will fully agree to the fact that social media has changed so many things for the better, and also lots of things for the worse. Like, I think you don't get Black Lives Matter if social media is in that space. You don't get the rise of Trump if social media is not in the space. You don't get so many people galvanized. You don't get the dope indigenous folks were out there trying to save the space and
when they were protecting the land from fracking, correct?
Yes. Right. Like, I don't think you get that without social media, right?
Yeah.
That is performative speech turning itself directly into action, right?
Yeah.
So the thing that I try to tell people is when they're out in the world and they're saying their thing really loud, I was like, all right, dope. You've said this thing. What's going to be the actionable step that you're going to ask people to take alongside you? Because once you've said the thing, you can wash your hands of it and then expect somebody else to do the work.
Yeah.
But if you don't do that extra layer and say, okay, cool, now we're going to galvanize people to go do a thing, it changes it. Like, a lot of people right now are just like, don't vote. Or I tried to vote and last time I voted,
apathy.
This is what we got.
Yeah.
Right. And you wind up getting into this apathetic space, which I also think is a part of that is one part of that empathy withdrawal now of like, oh man, I have so many things to think about all the time, all these issues that are happening that I should, because the internet tells me, care a lot about, even if I do care a lot about that stuff. But you're a human being. And we've never lived in a time like this where everyone is in your pocket, in your ear, in your space. We've never been like this before. This is a very new thing for human beings. And people forget to remember that.
Our brains aren't built for it.
No, you're totally not built for all the information that you're pulling in all the time right now. You're absolutely not built for it.
The varying of emotions, the varying of expectations people are placing on you, then that causes you to do further reflection on are you doing the right thing? Should I be doing something else? The paradox of choice starts to land in when it's like, oh, I'm on Instagram. There's a lot of hot people on Instagram. A lot hotter than my significant other. What do I do? And so it's just like all these things start to compound into your brain, and you're just in this constant state of I guess like nothingness, as you said, lack of empathy. You're just kind of existing.
Kind of. I mean, I think it's a thing where we're still trying to figure out like what is the actual good balance for most of this stuff. And I think we're not going to see, it's not going to happen in our generation. Like the generation that's coming up now, they will have the ability to manifest that and figure it out because they were, it's like Bane, they were born in it.
Yeah, no, they were born with the cell phone in their hand.
Yeah, exactly. Right. So like I am happy that I was not in that generation because I have the ability to be like, oh, we didn't have that. That wasn't a thing. You can. It was a weird time of innocence, which was kind of beautiful.
I miss it. I miss the dial television, and I miss the ability to go to school without a cell phone and not have shooter drills be a standard thing now in America. Like,
it was wild to think about where we are now in comparison to when I was growing up in the Bronx in the 90s in high school. And the thing that everyone was beefing about was like, oh, we can't have metal detectors in the school. And now, even with that moment, even in that space, we were not as afraid as kids are now because the level of danger has infinitely expanded, right? It's wild right now.
And it's because I think we're exposed constantly to those dangers because of this information overload. Something that happens distantly from us is now in our life.
Yeah.
And that starts to affect what we actually believe we have control over. Once again, looking at those circles around us, what's actually within our scale of impact. Well, now something that's happened in a country thousands upon thousands of miles away from you, that's now something that is affecting your day personally. even though you in no way will ever come in contact with those individuals, have any issues associated with it. There might be some economic adjustments that may occur, but otherwise, it shouldn't be impacting your daily life.
Nope. But I think as humans have continued to try to figure out their emotional state, which is consistently and constantly in flux.
Yeah.
Like most people aren't just a way for a long period of time. I woke up today and I was depressed as hell. I don't even know why I don't even know why.
You just wake up that way. But that's the thing. And that's the glory of mood trackers. I love to see mine. Like a few days ago, I was in the ruts. Today, I was like, oh, okay, I'm okay. But that's the thing, is just like we're constantly shifting individuals, but we're always trying to figure out, okay, well, within my day and how I'm going to present this day, what do I have the ability to impact, and how do I choose to spend that day? And one thing I do want to talk about is about, like, as you mentioned with like SpawnonMe, highlighting, like lifting people of color to the stage with you. I guess tell me about the origin of everything that you're developing, and why there was a need for that in your perspective.
Yeah, I was at my old job doing my IT help desk thing, and was not feeling very smart because I was teaching folks how to use a mouse.
Yeah.
And I was like, I'm a grown adult and they are grown adults and they don't know how to use a mouse. I don't feel like this is right.
Yeah.
And again, it's like, you know, it's the beauty of working in the unionized system sometimes. It's like you wind up kind of having folks who are stuck in a way. Sat there and was like, this isn't great. I need to figure something out. So I was not a classically trained writer. I am not a writer by trade. But I was like, oh, I can make a blog. Oh, I know Word. I can figure out WordPress and figure that out, or Blogger at that point. And was like, oh, I would love to write. There were two black dudes who were in the video game space that I remember very, very specifically. Will O'Neill and Ngai Kroll, who were like the only two people who looked like me that I could see in that video game space. And I was like, I know there have to be people who look like me making games at this point.
Yeah.
There has to be. How do we find who they are? Because I'm not going to find that out in a history book. Where is that going to be? That's not going to be on TV. So decided that at that moment wanted to try to figure out, like, how do we start to unearth some of this stuff and how do we kind of talk about it?
Yeah.
Fast forward a couple of years after that, I wrote. There was a game called Sound Shapes that was out for the Vita. I love music creation. I love games that where you're able to make music. And that game had this layer where users were generating content for it, right? So they were making levels, all this stuff. And I was like, ooh, I'd love to reach out to those folks and go talk to them about why they did what they did. And that kind of sparked my want to interview people and to talk to folks. The PlayStation blog hit me up and was like, we were going to do this. You want to do it for us? And I was like, what? Okay, I'll do that. A weekly thing on one of the biggest blogs on the planet. I'll do that. Sure.
Yeah.
And then that bubbled up into doing more of that work, and then it fizzled out because no one wanted to read my long form blathering. And then I was like, well, podcasting has always been in the space too. I was a fan of Giant Bomb, the One Up Show, all those kinds of things. And decided, I was like, I've always wanted to try this. My favorite class in college was speech class. Yeah. I don't know why. I was not that kid who was like, oh, let me go talk to everybody and be in front of the.
Well, you did like the as you said, you were like the class clown and stuff like that. You do some like aspects of performance a little bit when you were younger.
You get that one laugh and then you're like, oh, ooh.
Now I know what that mic can do. Yeah.
Yeah, that kind of thing. And you're like, oh, okay. So you fast forward and met my co-host and co-founder of SpawnonMe, Cicero Holmes at that time. We were playing 2K. We had a hour-long conversation on the phone, and we were like, let's do this. He's in Chicago. I'm in Brooklyn, New York at that point. We started our first show almost 10 years ago now at this point. And the rest is kind of history. It's one of those wild things of just like the internet brought us together.
Yeah.
And the internet was the thing that, you know, who knew that was going to be a thing that you could do cross country. I had done a show on Google Plus that was called Character Select with like 17 people on the panel.
Yeah.
It was awful and fantabulous and great at the same time. We were all at like 240p hanging out.
Oh my God.
It was awful.
Early era live was not pretty.
No, it was bad. It was real bad.
My early Justin TV broadcasts, when it was stable and I could actually ingest, were interesting shows to say the least. I think Chasen might have been on a few of those, who was in the chat earlier.
Yeah.
What would you say, like, as you go through the journey, like obviously launching the show, having quite success, over the years with this. It's like, what is the greatest joy you've found with it, would you say?
I get to manifest a dream every week.
Whoa.
Like, that's hard to say.
That is something that I think most people just personally want. Like, can I achieve one dream? Like, they have their goals and stuff like that.
Yeah. The interesting, I think the thing that really pulls it together for me is, like, I was told very, very early when I was in junior high school, and it was a balance of Kahlief is really smart and can accomplish a bunch of things. And also, Kahlief is not really smart. He shouldn't do any. Like, I had my guidance counselor in high school tell me I should never go to college.
Wow.
That's a great guidance counselor, by the way. Like, you should not achieve anything. You should plant yourself and do nothing in this space.
That is such an interesting approach for somebody to say, especially a guidance counselor. Just like, don't. Was he token up or something? Like, what was his deal?
I hope so. Like, I hope there was.
He's like, nothing matters, man. Just cruise through this small rock in the space to continue.
Kahlief, dude, you're a minority. Why do you care?
Oh my god.
I don't think it was that. I don't think it was that. But he was like super harsh with that. He was like really like, I don't see enough stuff in you to want to see you continue forth with your education.
Wow.
That's a wild thing to tell a high school junior, right? At your most formative part of your existence, right? That is a really interesting pivot point for so many people, right?
That's years of therapy right there.
Word, right? And, I ate all mine, so it was good. But it wound up being that conversation that drove a lot of the stuff after a while, where it was like, okay, how do you figure out what is the thing that you want to do? And I think I got an email in year 2 of this one guy in Germany sent over an email because we were talking about the confluence of hip hop and video games. Of like, do we think that video games fit into that classic, the 4 pillars of hip hop, right? And it was a great conversation. It was fantastic. He wasn't a hip hop fan. We were talking about De La Soul, and he was like, "Oh, I've never connected those two things together before. You are doing something very special. I hope you continue to do this because this really resonated with me." And I took that email because the biggest conversation in House Adams was, "Hey, Kai, you need to stop spending House Adams money for the SpawnonMe thing." And I was like, "But it's going to be great." And he was like, "But it's expensive." And I was like, yeah, I'm sorry. So I showed my wife the email and she was like, "Oh. Huh. Okay. I get it. I appreciate it." Because again, this is like the only thing that I've ever stuck to.
Yeah.
I've been a serial start a thing, kill it off, never really finish anything. And this has been the one thing besides my relationship that I've stuck with this long and put so much effort and energy into and continue to try to grow and foster.
And it means a ton when you get that singular piece of mail or that message that's just like, this is what I needed. And you brought it into the world.
Yep.
There's so much validation for the efforts and the work and the energy that you put in when you receive that.
You're not crazy. It's that instant moment of you're not crazy. You're like, oh, can I do a thing and actually make it good? And feel like it feels like, because again, I think most of all of the work I think we do as creatives, as entertainers, as all that stuff, I would never call myself an entertainer in that way. That feels weird. It just does. I'm an entertainer anyway.
Well, you'll be doing your residency in Vegas here shortly. Hey. Wayne Newton stepping aside and you're stepping in.
I hope so. I want a Wayne spot. But you want people to feel a thing.
Yeah.
You want people to feel a thing, and if you can bring them from point A to point B, that's the end goal. Like everything else after that is gravy. Like I don't try to really put a lot of magical dust on all of it and be like, oh, I'm changing the world and all this kind of stuff. I think there have been things that have actually done some of that. Like I think we've done really good work in that respect, but I am not braggadocious enough to feel like that is the main thrust of why I do this, because that's not it. I don't care about some of that stuff. I want my flowers, but I also want to make sure that like at the heart of all of it is humility. Like humility is the thing that matters the most in my respect.
I love that. I love that you were saying how take people on a journey just so they can feel. When we think of going to the movies, when we come out of a movie and your friend asks you, how's the film? They're not asking you the special effects and stuff like that. They're really like, how did it make you feel coming out?
Yeah.
Is that a feeling worth me exploring?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And a lot of those things are universal, and I think we forget that. We forget that a lot, especially with the way we're inundated with all of the blinky lights and all the words and all the stuff and all the feelings all at the same time. Like, we have moved so far away from feels in the like truest form of it, right?
Yeah.
Like we have instant feels a lot, but like deep, heartfelt, what did that make me think? Did I do the emotional investment, the emotional audit to understand what that was for me in that moment and how is that going to drive a thing forward? Most people don't do that anymore.
Yeah.
You don't have time to, right? I don't fault people for it.
Yeah.
They don't have time anymore to do it because your brain is filled with stuff.
How do you find time for it in your day to disconnect and feel?
Ooh, I mean, interestingly enough, gaming is a space where I zone out and I'm doing some of that work.
Yeah.
When I'm at home making beats or stuff like that, that's another way to do it. And also like when I get a chance to plot out the course of a show, like that's a part of that too. That is a bigger creative outlet to get to an endpoint to me to try to think about what is this episode supposed to make you feel. The one thing I'm sad about from a creative standpoint is I used to do college radio.
Yeah.
And when I think of what SpawnonMe should have been, right, or where I'm hoping it can still go, is I want that college radio feel. I want it to feel like music is pulling you through that experience too, but you can't do that in podcasting now because
love rights management. It's my favorite.
Yeah.
That's why I enjoyed like my early shows I used to do on Winamp radio, and that was fair game. That was basically pirate radio. Go to my IP, listen to my video game music night with John. You know?
Yeah, it's so rad. Like we were one of the first. We might have been the first show in the Pacific Northwest to do a video game podcast on a radio station.
Yeah,
I think that is the. I think I can plant that flag, and it was so great because I could weave in music and I could weave in the stories. I can do that stuff. It was constricted because of time, and you got to stick to your time block. But
exactly.
That was the closest to what it was, and where I hope to have landed it.
It's funny when we think about like all the experiences like what you're describing when it comes to radio podcast, effectively the way that creators should, I think, be thinking about when it comes to like Twitch broadcasting, any sort of live format, just ensuring that you're taking people on a journey. You got a point A to point B. When you reach point B, that's your close of your show. You want them to come back, so you want to make sure you leave them with the feeling that they want to come back to you. And that's something of which I think more people just need to actively think about, period.
Well, I was lucky enough to have you kind of teach me that. So I
oh, God. Okay, so you're literally just giving me what? You're just feeding back.
But like, seriously, I think one of the things that I have learned from you is a lot of those layers in all the conversations we had in that initial ambassador meetup that we had at Twitch. Like, I learned so much from that day and that weekend, or a couple days that it was, that changed the full like thrust of what SpawnonMe was. Because it gave me direction in a way that I had a brilliant person telling me how things can maneuver, right? And that changes a lot of stuff. Like, I now know how to pitch myself. I know what ritual is. I know what those things, those stuck with me. Yeah. In a way that I constantly have in the back of my mind when I'm creating now. So all of that stuff, like, kudos to you for pulling all that together and having that be there as a recipe for the way to think about how to move someone from A to B emotionally and performatively. Yeah.
Well, I appreciate the kudos to my side. I appreciate you for that. It's really kind of you. But you're extending kudos to the greater space moving forward as well. You have an awards show that you do. So tell me about that you do now.
So the Spawnies is our award show. Didn't do a lot on the name brainstorm.
It connects beautifully. You're fine. You're good.
Brand recognition.
That's all it's about. That's all it's about.
That's all it's about. But it goes back to that main conversation of like, how do we showcase the people who you never got a chance to see, right? I didn't learn about it's so funny. Now I just forgot his name. Jerry Lawson. Jerry Lawson, who was the founder of the cartridge. So we would have none of this video game stuff if he wasn't a part of that integral moment. Was a black dude from the Midwest, and that changed a lot of the way I think about all of this stuff. It's like, oh, if that person was there and never got their flowers until very recently, how many other named folks don't get that love? How do we connect and build something that is for them to showcase them in a way that makes sense, not only for the folks who are the historians, so that we can, bubble it up and do the archaeological dig, but also that's supposed to inspire people. Yeah. Like, oh, you didn't know that the person that was behind one of your favorite games this year looked like you. Yeah. That is amazingly important, right? The thing that makes our show different is I also believe that there's a huge amount of connected tissue between culture, especially Black culture, especially hip hop culture, and the game space. And no one has really delved into what does that look like from an awards perspective? What does that look like from a showcase perspective? And what does that mean for how do we tell the story and how do we entertain folks, right? Like, Spawnies is a mix of the Game Awards and the BET Awards in my mind, right?
I like that.
But it's the thing of like, we won't take up 4 hours of your time.
And it's also in the approach of the award show, because we were talking just a bit before we started recording about, like, I typically look at award shows as schemes, or they're just marketing plays, or they're just oftentimes they're bought out, like by the talent that's performing or they're present, and it's not really about, as you said, giving flowers where flowers are deserved for individuals who've worked their ass off on a title or contributed in incredible ways to bettering the community, or whatever it might be. It's a very different type of award show than typically what I see.
Yeah, and I think the hope is that when you leave that show, and we've placed it in a spot that's very, very important too. And I think we're trying to figure out, when do we air this show? Do we do it during Black History Month? Do it before? Do we do it after? After feels a little bit silly, because then you're in like mid-February into March, and you're like, that was last year's games. No one cares. Yeah. But also, like, Black History Month has a lot of weight to it, right? And you're like, oh, you must be the most black during Black History Month. You got to be extra black, and you got to be noir black. And I'm like, I don't want to be that black. I want to be.
I just want to be me.
I want to be medium black for this show. But we wound up landing it toward the end of January. Yeah. Because what we found was that energy really brings a nice momentum into Black History Month, right? It comes off the heels of a lot of the conversations and the wants that we heard from the Black Twitch community, from the Black creator community during the George Floyd conversations and the hate raids and all that kind of stuff, to say, how do we give ourselves something to be joyous about that's not connected just to this month, and how do we level up and elevate all of the people who are around that space, right? And it was great. We had almost 360,000 views on it.
That's wild.
During the live show. The thing that I'm most proud of is we had a whole hour plus show. My mods didn't moderate one part of chat.
Hell yeah.
Twitch, and we didn't moderate anything. There was nothing to moderate. It is the wildest thing on the planet.
It's beautiful when that happens. I've seen that occur. I had once put a show on the front page, which was a group of women talking about their love of like vintage fashion. Yeah. And not a single negative comment. And it's I think there's an aspect of the space that you're creating. If it's constructed in the right way, people will know how to behave in that space. So, like, if I were to walk into a Broadway theater, and I know I'm collectively going in with the audience, and I know the rules, and I know how to engage with the show and what have you, and I sit down, there's a very slim chance that I'm going to stand up in the middle of this show and just scream at the top of my lungs, I shit myself. There's just not going to be that one absurd moment of, wait, what? This doesn't add anything to the conversation of Glenda flying across the stage.
Maybe it does.
Or maybe it does. Maybe that's what propelled her. I don't know. So, like, when we think about that, it's like, I think when you create the right space, the nonsense just won't come into it, because it's just like, it's not that. It's not the space. I won't have a chance to be the heckler. I won't get the stage.
I hope. I mean, I hope that that's what we've built, right? Like, I think SpawnonMe, and again, like I am not the most prolific streamer. I don't stream as much as you kind of need to grow on the platform, but I do feel like we have set a really easy set of rules for you to follow, and the vibe that you get from me is the vibe that you get. And it feels like when you come into that space, I want you to feel welcome. I want you to come in. I want you to share whatever random ratchet thought you have in your mind, good, bad, ugly, or indifferent. I do want you to understand, though, that there is a revolving door. And if you mess up, you got to dip. Like, we got to give you the boot. I will give you as much space to do what you need to do, but I also want this space to be a house for good vibes and a house for good energy and a space for us to be able to do what we need to do in a real way. Like, I will not be leaving. You can't evict me. You got to go. So, you know, it's about cultivating good spaces, about bringing good energy to a spot, and then hopefully people will rock with you and continue to do it.
What you just said there hit incredibly deep. I've never heard somebody say it on any show or anything that I've witnessed where the specific word was, I'm not leaving.
Yeah.
And when people think about the internet, they'll come in, they'll just harass, they'll do all these things. But it is that reminder, no, this is my space. You have the option of being here. You chose to come into my home.
That is a phrase that is on my monitor, and that came from therapy. And that phrase is, you chose this. So when I am upset, when I'm fussy, when I'm like, why didn't I do that thing? Or why did I do that thing? And I'm mad and I'm about to get mad. I look at that post-it and I'm like, you chose this. It goes back to that ephemeral, like, what are we doing here? What are we going to do here for the time that we're here? Do you want to fuss and be beefy about all that stuff and get mad at people on the internet, do that stuff? I can say tomorrow, if I'm the most upset about all of this, and I'm just upset, all of this is bad, I can't get the numbers I want, all that stuff. I look at that post-it note and I'm like, you chose this, and you choose to do it every day you decide to do it. You can choose not to do it whenever you want. It is empowering to say that out loud.
And even relating it to your emotions. You're angry right now. You're choosing to be angry right now. You're happy. You are choosing happiness.
The hard part, though, is you wind up sometimes that winds up potentially bridging itself into toxic positivity. So you have to check yourself on it. But it is a space where I truly believe, I think it is a thing that I tell every creator on every platform that I'm on. And it was a thing that a lot of creators who we share space with didn't want to hear when we were having that conversation about hate raids and all the other stuff. And I was like, look, as much as you hate everything that's happening to you right now, look me in my eyes and tell me that you're leaving, because I know you're not. I don't want you to sit into a space where you're being besieged by grossness and all that kind of stuff. There's a platform responsibility to keep you safe, but also there's a responsibility for your own mind, body, and soul to say, I'm choosing to stay here. And I can dip if I want to, because this space isn't treating me well, or those folks are giving me grief, or any of that stuff. It's hard to say it out loud and to really like do something with that. But I truly believe that, like, you can remove some of this stuff by saying, you will not affect me that way. You will not get this emotion out of me in the way you are choosing to. I am the master of this. This is mine. So I've learned that therapy session was really important to put that into my mind frame and have that as a mantra. And that cycles through my head all the time when I'm mad or I'm sad or I'm just like, what am I doing? Right.
That is now something that I'm going to be printing out and putting on my monitor, because we get inundated constantly with various thoughts, and often these are the thoughts of other individuals, or the exposure that we'll get online to these types of either people in chat, trolls, or Twitter, or whatever social, we get inundated with all these factors. You choose to be in that space. You have the choice not to be in that space. You're not obligated to social media. And I hear it too often that people say, oh, I have to be on this. I have to be doing this. You don't have to do shit.
Nope. You don't.
Oh, the only way for my business to be successful is there. And I'm like, look at every major artist and director and actor. Are they actively tweeting 20 to 30 times a day? Only when they're in their off season. Like, they're not there.
Yeah.
We choose
None
these
of this
spaces.
Stuff is necessary. None of it is necessary. It is a function of what you're trying to do. It is a tool.
That
social media is a tool. It is a tool. And you can choose to engage with it, but you have to understand what you're dipping your toes into.
Yeah.
And what parts you're going to let affect you.
Yeah.
There's so much beef that happens in the space. I'm like, well, y'all can rock with that. I'm not dealing with that.
Because it's not your thing, once again. Like, you don't have to be a part of somebody else's issue, really, that they try to pull you into.
And it doesn't do anything. Like, again, it goes back to that conversation of performative layers, right? Yeah. Like, what is it? What's the end result? What's the thing that I'm trying to gain from this, right? And I think there's a lot of folks who are really smart and savvy, who are folks who have learned how to crystallize that and actually use it for nefarious reasons, and some that are not so nefarious, but also lend to adding to that clout layer.
Yeah.
But for me, the thing I want to be able to do is to go to bed and be okay. All the other stuff, I'm much more like, oh, we have beef, John. Look, let's jump on the phone and talk. Let's hash it out now, because I don't want to go to bed mad.
Yeah.
I'd much rather do that, squash whatever beef I have, and then be like, look, are we good?
Yeah.
Because I care about you as a human being.
Yeah.
And I care about the people who I have in that circle. So
yeah,
I think people, once they've understood that layer of it and have really tried to kind of like sit with it for a minute, you change your mind frame about like, what does all of this mean? How am I contributing to the grossness that I say I hate? Right?
Yeah.
Because that's the thing too. We talk a lot of shit about, oh, I hate that stuff, but you'll be the first one talking shit about somebody online. So we have to mean what we say and say what we mean. I think there's a lot of people who just don't do that now.
Oh yeah, for sure. There was actually something a colleague said to me in response to it wasn't in response to me, actually. I know I retweeted it. It was people who give advice on, let's say, Twitter, are actually giving advice to their younger selves, or maybe even to like a hey, make sure you don't do this. And it's like, you're literally just talking to yourself because you wish you had done that.
Right. And it's so clear as day. Like, the thing that I have learned about all of that too is like, also, again, it goes back to like a really simple thing of like, words matter, right?
Yeah.
And when I say that, it's not even the fact of like, don't be mean to people. It's like, if you refocus the energy of your words inward and say, this thing for me is this way.
Yeah.
As opposed to this overarching blanket advice that you give to all these people that it doesn't work for, and it doesn't really matter, and it doesn't take into any consideration circumstance, luck, networking, how many people, age. It doesn't take any of that stuff into account. But it's like, hey, y'all, you shouldn't do this and this and this. I got my face eaten when I was like, hey, everybody, all this grossness that's on the timeline right now, this isn't a good look. And people are like, Kahlief, shut the hell up. I got people banning me and blocking me and stuff. And I was like, look, we've just said as a collective, and this is, again, going back a couple of years to all that stuff.
Yeah.
There's not a good amount of money coming into Black creator spaces.
Yeah.
It's not about the performative layers of what's the white gaze happening to our community, who are the people who are looking at our stuff, who's that stuff. From a small business perspective, you don't see the people who are some of the most successful rich people out on Front Street talking about all the dumb shit that they do. They don't do it. It's not a thing that adds to your brand. It's not a thing that you have to figure out. And the internet is forever. So someone will snag that, pull that down, and be like, well, this is the version of you that you are putting out in the world. Again, it's like, it's simple math, but people are too busy in there, again, being loud and mad early.
Well, I think it's, once again, it's the space of which we have to actually talk, converse, figure out how we can actually enact change. We are separated from the most immediate communities around us for the most part. And we have leaned, I think, way too heavily on these devices to be our outlet. And that is what causes the danger of impulse tweeting, or I'm angry. Where else can I put my anger I'm going to put it straight onto the internet, and now it's with your persona forever.
Yep. And it's never worth it.
Yeah.
Like, it feels good in the moment, and then you look at it, and it's been really interesting with the stuff that for folks in the chat who may not know, this ongoing beef that I have, this faux beef with my friend Paris Ali, who's over at Game Check Radio. So we've been doing this thing for the past couple of years about how I can't cook, how he can't cook. He roasted me on the Xbox showcase that he was hosting in front of millions of people, and then my life is the same. People are now looking at me in the grocery store like, "Hey, it's that dude that can't cook." I was like, "That's messed up," but it's great. And a part of it, to come back to that part of the conversation, like, when do you put a thing out? What do you say? How do you say it? We have had conversations, between he and I, where I've put out a snarky thing, and because we understand how the internet likes to form things in the way that it wants, we've had conversations to be like, that thing that you just said, even though I know that that's not a mean thing that you said, some will misconstrue that. Maybe we should pull that down, right? Because it's like, we know the stereotypes. Oh, two black men fussing on the internet and beefing. Oh, these two dudes who are having this conversation, they're full of shit because, they're shilling for whatever product or whatever it may be.
Yeah.
Like, all of those layers are playing in our heads because we're paying attention not only to the idea of what our brands are, but also the safety of the other person.
Yeah.
That's a care moment of saying, I care about you. I don't want you to have to go through all these mentions that are going to hit your phone and bug you out for the rest of the day because I said a stupid thing that I can easily pull down and it doesn't matter anyway.
Yeah.
Like, it's a matter of thinking about the other person on the end of that line, on the end of that tweet.
Yeah.
And being like, oh, there's a level of care that I could offer you without you ever knowing it.
Yeah.
And that's important. You have to think about that stuff because the internet is wild. People don't give a shit about truth. People don't care about feelings. People care about the timeline being on fire. And I'm like, that doesn't do anything for anyone because that person on the other end has to deal with the repercussions of any of the stuff that you say.
And there's an algorithm that feeds into it to ensure that your timeline's fire, that it's feeding into whatever keeps you most engaged. Oftentimes that's anger, aggression, and then that then fuels your responses that are then fueled into that same thing. It's I put it out on Twitter earlier today after reading a little bit more of 4,000 Weeks, which is a great book. But it's just the reminder of we are not customers of any of these services. We are the product. So as soon as we can accept that and acknowledge that fact, maybe we'll be a bit more mindful about how we give them additional products to sell.
Everyone wants to feel like they are the main player in their story, which they are. But once you've given that story to someone else, they get to rewrite it. They get to rewrite it in whatever way they want. And once that genie's out of the bottle, you can't put it back. Nope. You just can't.
So I think, if anything, there's something that we advise, like all listeners, especially all those who have been watching live here, put on your monitor, put on your mirror, whatever it is that you interact with most throughout your day, or at least that you can instill in you. You chose this, or you choose this. You chose anything that you were choosing to do, whether it's emotion, career, the state of being, the stuff. There's aspects that you've chose. Now, there are things outside of your control. Obviously, there's variables of nature that you cannot be in control of.
Yes.
But when it comes to how you respond, there's even a great book called The Four Agreements by Don Miguel Ruiz, which talks about how you respond to people. A person, if I were to slap you in the face, you would just react, okay, that was John's choice. Now, if I slap them back, that's my choice.
Yep.
And so it's always just that reminder of self. So I encourage every listener, every person who's watching right now, do that for yourself as you're thinking about, well, what am I doing, or what changes can I make, or I want to do something, not I should do something. We talked about like getting the word should out of our vocabulary on an earlier episode. But just reminding yourself that you chose this, and you can choose to do differently.
Yep. You have the power to not do a thing.
Surprisingly enough, you have the power to not do a thing. I do want to give you the opportunity, like, tell when can people tune into your shows? You're all over the place doing lots of other things outside as well. So
yeah,
what's the latest, or how can people catch you?
You can check out the SpawnonMe podcast every Monday. A new episode goes up on all podcast feeds. You can also check out the show that I did with NBC this past year called the Fan Control Football Show. In that mix, you just look up Kahlief Adams and Fan Control Football. You can go check that out. And our live show goes up every Wednesday, 6 p.m. PST at twitch.tv/SpawnonMe. You can check out the show live, and then it goes out to all the on the planet. So yeah, a lot of stuff coming. Spawnies is happening in January 2023. We have some fun things that are going to be connected to that. Some twists to it there.
Hell yeah.
And yeah, a lot of dope stuff on the way.
Yo, okay, so everybody follow. Make sure you're tuning into all of these things. Kahlief, it's just a pleasure. Thank you for coming on the show. You're crushing it. You're standing by just great things of which you're creating for our space. So I'm just very grateful that I could have a chance to talk with you today.
Always down to rock with you again. When I think of the people whose name is that if I fuck it up, I want them to call me out on it. You are one of those folks. So I appreciate you in the space that you occupy and everything that you do.
Awesome.
And it's been beautiful to see you branch out in this way, and I love it. So thank you again for having me, and thank you, chat, for rocking.
Hell yeah. The next time we bring you on the show, we're gonna be talking about your kinks. I'm very excited to dive into the world of BDSM with the collected by SpawnonMe.
I've had very, very different thoughts about the SpawnonMe name of that show. Think about that for sure.
We got it. It'll be great. I appreciate you all for listening. Thank you so much. Have a great day. Even better tomorrow, everybody. We'll see you next time. Take care.